And while you'd say, well, no, we were doing that before. We were, we actually talked to people. Trust me, you didn't talk to people anything like we're going to have you go talk to people. Because now you have commitments from not only investors, you have people lining up to spend the next couple of years of their career based on your hypotheses. And so bullet one is stop selling and start listening. And I want you to test a series of hypotheses. But the first two are just so fundamental, I have to tell you I'm embarrassed that in a couple of companies I just skipped asking these questions. And one is, well, I might have had a great vision of the product. Any product vision underlying it has an assumption that a customer has a problem or a need. Did anybody bother to ask a couple of customers whether they actually have this problem or need? Some of you are nodding going, oh, go back, check problem, need. And some of you are not laughing at all, going, uh-oh. I'm just suggesting that one of the key hypotheses among a long list of them that you want to check is your assumption about the customer's problem matched by anybody else outside the building? And that better be, heck yes. And if not, then why not? And then if you find that, the next thing you want to ask is, does our product concept, not the features, not the data sheet, not anything else, but just the concept, match the problem? Problem, concept. If they don't match, you have an impedance mismatch very early on. So in customer discovery, you want to test your hypotheses. There's a list of them. Pricing hypotheses, customer archetype hypotheses, distribution channel hypotheses. All of these can be answered early on with low-cost, fast experiments. And this is where the notion of speed and tempo come in. This is not an inside-the-building activity. This is an activity that occurs continually with irrational speed and execution. There's a great quote from Mario Andretti, some of you might know as a race car driver, about speed. And he said, if you feel like you're in control, you're not going fast enough. And that's what this process should feel like. This is not some theoretical, let's sit around the conference room and argue about features and who's right.
But Steve,
Yeah.
Is it the same as just doing a focus group?
Right. Thank you, Eric. Okay, ask Steve question 2. It turns out that a lot of people confuse customer development with, oh, I got it. I'm going to go out and do a very fast and super focus group and getting the sum of all customer feedback. Actually, it's the inverse of this. Startups exist because founders have a vision, and they're executing with passion to that vision. All customer development is about is to see whether there is a customer base and market for the product as envisioned by the founders. That's what customer development is about. And if and only if you can't find those customers that match your vision, do you start iterating the product. But hands off the product, hands off the vision, until you actually start asking the questions. So it is possible to actually build a super feature set by asking people what they want. And that's why some startups deliver 4 years after they start. This is not about collecting feature sets. This is about seeing whether there's a market, customers, and business for the product as envisioned. And if not, what changes do you need to make if and only if you consistently hear different input? Eric?
Amen.
So the exit criteria from this step, what are your customers' top problems? And more importantly, how much will you pay for them? Does your product concept solve them? And draw up a day in the life of a customer. And this one seems so trivial. It's the one I love to talk about. If I've invested in your company, God forbid, you get a pen, go up to the whiteboard. Tell me about your customer. Really? Well, what do they do when they wake up in the morning? What do they eat? What do they drive? What do they read? Why? When you go in their office, what will you see? Oh, good, you're selling them a software product. Well, when they're using your product, theoretically, what else do they have open on their screen? What are their other choices, etc.? This is not something you're going to get by doing a SurveyMonkey survey. You truly need, and some more people are laughing in the room looking at their shoes. You truly need a deep understanding of customers such that at the end you can actually describe an archetype or several archetypes of, here's what who our customers are demographically, geographically, with psychographic cuts, and we know them because we've lived out with them, and here's why they should buy, and here's how we should reach them. This is a deep understanding. I believe if you can't do this, you're just wasting your time saying you're in customer development and just ought to go through execution. And by the way, draw the org charts of users and buyers. And while this might sound like a B2B org chart, it works for B2C or it works for consumer products. When I buy a car, which is the ultimate consumer product, I kind of go, well, I'm the ultimate decision maker. Now, obviously, no one's laughing because you don't have a wife and 2 teenage daughters, but trust me, I am not the ultimate decision maker. I might think I'm the ultimate decision maker, but obviously there are influencers and recommenders in my household, and those exist in all products. The second step, customer validation. Here you want to develop a repeatable and scalable model. You've now proven you understand enough about the customers to actually do trial selling. And at least the things I'm interested in, we're generating revenue from day one. Day one. I tend to think that if you have not a user model, but a revenue model, and you're not charging for the buggiest piece of thing you've ever shipped, you don't have a revenue model. Why? Because having people not pay for a product is the world's best signal. They will tell you immediately by not buying it what they think of you and your strategy. And trust me, if they love it, they won't care how many bugs there are. In fact, they'll defend it to other people. And for most products, only early adopters and internal evangelists, that is, crazy people like you, will buy your product. But there are enough of them to get you started to understand whether you have a business or not. That little feedback loop on the bottom of customer validation is the don't fire the head of sales feedback loop. Because the real model, as it works today, is you have a revenue plan, you have a board meeting, you launch your product, the board says to the VP of sales, how's it going? And they go, oh, it's great, wonderful launch, great pipeline. 6 weeks later, another board meeting. How's it going? Pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. Oh, great, pipeline. Yeah, pipeline, the revenue, pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. All right, next board meeting. Well, so the quarter's over. How do we do? Well, the pipeline. And the VCs cock one eyebrow at the CEO. Really? We're talking about pipeline. No. Next board meeting. How's it going? Well, no one is sitting next to the VP of sales. In fact, the stench of death is already in the room. And he or she says, pipeline? Next board meeting, who's no longer there? VP of sales. Now, by the way, just to extend the story, you hire a new VP of sales, and they don't make the revenue number. Who's gone next? No, VP of marketing. Got at least one more exec to fire. What are you thinking about? Then the CEO. And by the way, in a bubble, you know what happens? It's an up round. But instead, if you're testing sales early on, and I mean early on, charging for things that you'd be embarrassed to show your best friend, that's how early on you will not fire anybody. You will find out whether you have a valid business model or not. And I always get the objection is, oh, but we'll, poison our total available market. Really? Well, how many people are looking at our site? 300. Well, what's the total available market? 30 million. So what if I personally write an apology letter to all 300? Would you feel better? Why, yes. Okay, can we do this? Customer validation, exit criteria. Do you have a proven sales roadmap? Do you understand a complete sales cycle? And again, this works whether it's a detailed $2 million enterprise sale or a $39 consumer sale, or even you're going for users. And does the financial model make sense? This last bullet is really important. And nowadays, see Wall Street Journal, more important. You need to understand that you have a liquidity model at the end. And it's not that Google buys us. I mean, that might be and that might happen, but that's not a rational strategy. As a sidebar, Sean Ellis asked me to talk about market type real quickly. I just want to introduce a concept which, when I came up with a product development model, I still had a conundrum. Sometimes this thing would work for me and sometimes not. And so I wondered, was it the people were different, or is it the products were different? That is, I could run this model across a whole set of companies and find out that sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And I realized that we had an English language problem, believe it or not. The apocryphal story is Eskimos have like 11 words for snow. Yet in Silicon Valley, we only have one word for startup. And I think that's the cause of a lot of failures. I'm going to explain why. I'll suggest that there are at least 3 types of startups because they're in 3 types of markets. I believe that there are some startups, by the way, type of market changes everything, and it changes everything because sales and business development and marketing changes radically depending on your market type, and details this week actually. It changes your market size, your cost of entry, what kind of sales you do, how much capital you need, etc. And here's why it's different. So if you're in an existing market, my definition of existing is you have a product that's faster and better. You're kind of a high-end existing product. But if you're in a resegmented market, you have 2 choices. Am I in a niche, or am I offering a low-cost substitute for something in an existing market? Or I could be in a new market. This is Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation. I'll give you a great example. Anybody remember Handspring? Right? It was the iPhone predecessor. That's another joke. 2001, Donna Dubinsky and Jeff Hawkins, who had left Palm, managed to license the operating system, everything else, and build essentially a Palm clone. Except it had a little, what they called a handspring adapter, a little SIM card extension, and it had more memory and came in colors. Donna turned to her VP of sales and said, I want you to take 10% of the PDA market, and I wanted it in 15 months. And the VP of sales gulped and turned to the head of marketing and said, I want you to create end-user demand and drive it into my sales channels. Here are the numbers that Donna gave me. 15 months later, Handspring was a $150 million business. Palm clone. Okay. Roll the clock back 1995. Donna Dubinsky and Jeff Hawkins start Palm. Built essentially the same device, except it doesn't have 8 megabytes of memory, maybe it has 2. It doesn't have a springboard adapter and comes in one color, but it's the same device, same device. Imagine if Donna would have turned to her VP of sales and said, I want 10% of the PDA market. What number would that have been? 0. Why? Same device, same physical product. What's different? You're in a new market. In 2001, she was in an existing market. Every sales and marketing strategy that worked at Handspring would have tubed Palm in 1995. Same exact product. Startups not understanding about their market type are capable of executing brilliantly but incorrectly. There's a signal above the noise here. And by new and existing, it's very simple. Is there a TLA for the market? Anybody know what a TLA is? 3-letter acronym. Every entrepreneur knows what a TLA is. That is, do the customers know what the market is? Do customers know? Why, yes, we're in the whatever market. Boom. You're either in an existing or resegmented market. If the customers go, wow, great product. I don't know how to use it or even think about it. congratulations, you're in a new market where you have no competitors, but you sure have, you know, the classic hockey stick, and just hope you're not in that flat part of the stick when you run out of money. Does this make sense at all? Very important thing to know is like, ooh, what market am I in? And so lots of consequences here. You read the book, you'll see more of them, but it's an interesting signal on top of the customer development model. So this is all nice, and this is great theory, but it was nice when Eric was in my class. He actually said, well, this is wonderful, Steve, so what do I really do? I mean, we get it, you're a great strategy, and we love it, and so what do I do when I leave the class and actually have to go write some code? And I went, well, I'll come up with that next semester. And I never did, so Eric had to do it himself. So Eric, why don't you explain how it works, and what do you do when you actually, if you believe in this stuff?
Yeah, so when I was auditing Steve's class, we talked about already, he had that same diagram he showed before of the kind of linear product development series of milestones and gates. And I was at least advanced enough to be like, hey, wait a minute, that's not right anymore. We do this thing called agile software development that's product development but iterative. And at first I was like, oh, I know this whole customer development thing. Like, it's just be iterative. I do things. Anyone here release early, release often? Right? So I think you just do that, you'll basically take care of itself. Anyone actually tried to build a company with release early, release often? Anybody? Oh, we'll talk about it afterwards. It's entertaining. But before we get to that, I thought we'd start. I always say it's traditional in a talk about product development methodologies to beat up on waterfall. So here we go. So this is the waterfall methodology. The idea here is we have a linear process for deciding what it is that we're going to do. We're going to figure out what the requirements are. We're going to build some kind of specification. We're going to design the product. We'll then implement it. We'll have somebody certify or validate that it still works, and then it goes into maintenance mode. And when startups try to use this methodology, they get what I call achieving a failure. I've been through that myself personally, where you're being successful. That is, the product development team is moving linearly through the gates and is making progress. Is getting, is on schedule. Everything's on schedule. The milestones are being hit. The release trains are going out at the right time. Kind of everything's functioning according to the plan. And the only problem is there isn't a process in place for asking yourself, is this actually a very good plan to begin with? So you successfully execute the plan, and as Steve's talked about, you leave a crater at the end. Because, of course, by the time you're done building the product, it may be too late to change direction. But although it's fun to beat up on waterfall, it's actually a methodology that has its own internal logic and economics that makes sense. And I think it's really important to understand that before we move on to a more advanced product development scheme. Waterfall is extremely good for situations where both the problem and the solution are relatively well understood. The only problem is that startups almost never find themselves in that situation. In fact, most high-tech products, almost by definition, can't be in this category. The mortality rates on software products, period, on our ability to build any kind of software to spec on time, on budget, is something like 6 out of 10 never complete at all. That means the lucky ones are the ones that come in way late and way over budget, which is, I think, a little bit sad. So here we talk about known problem, known solution, and then we're going to take a unit of progress, which is advancing to the next stage. That's how we'll judge whether we're being successful or not as engineers.